Hey guys, so today we'll be talking about the Lord of the Sorry about that. The Lord of the Rings The Two Towers is directed by Peter Jackson, co-written by Jackson, Fran Walsh, Philippa Boyens, and Stephen Sinclair, and stars pretty much everyone from the first movie with a few new additions. You've got Bernard Hill as Theoden, Brad Dourif as Grima Wormtongue, Carl Urban as Eomer, Miranda Otto as Eowyn, David Wenham as Faramir, and of course Andy Serkis as Gollum. The Two Towers follows three separate storylines. First off, you've got Frodo and Sam who have no idea how to get to Mordor, but they run into Gollum who swears to bring them to Mordor, but he really just wants the ring for himself. Then you've got Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, and the reborn Gandalf making their way to the land of Rohan to convince the world of men to join the fight against Sauron. Then you've got Merry and Pippin who meet the Ent Treebeard, who's like a walking, talking tree, and they try to convince him to fight Saruman in Isengard. My friend described The Lord of the Rings The Two Towers as no one's favorite, and I kind of understand that in the sense that more people I think talk about Fellowship and Return of the King because naturally they're the bookends of the series, and it's just a result of being like the middle child or like the middle chapter in the trilogy. By no means does that mean that The Two Towers is any like lower in quality compared to the two. The Two Towers really does also stand on its own because it's the only part of the trilogy that really has like three really separate storylines running through it. And it's really about kind of recognizing the big picture, realizing that your place in this world is just kind of tiny and you have to band together if you want to fight a greater evil. The Lord of the Rings The Two Towers has arguably even better writing than Fellowship. It has an incredible set piece at the end, Battle of Helm's Deep, and of course has one of the greatest, if not the greatest, CGI character in a live-action movie ever put to film, Gollum. First off, in terms of visual effects, the sheer massiveness of Helm's Deep is so overwhelming, but in a great way. I mean, it's overwhelmingly awesome. There's so many moving parts in this battle, and you believe every single part of it. But I'd also like to highlight another smaller battle that I think is overlooked too much. That's the Warg battle. I think the realism in this is just as technically impressive as the sheer scale of Helm's Deep, because you know how hard it is to animate like these CGI wargs running around fighting against real people on real horses against a real background. That's really tough, and this movie really pulls it off. I know a lot of people don't really like the Ents because they're slow and boring, but they're kind of supposed to be slow and boring. But you really have to appreciate the creativity that went into animating these Ents and like the number of moving parts in their designs. The animators really had to make all of the Ents look like trees, but at the same time make them look different from each other, and I think they really do pull it off also very well. But of course we get to the big kahuna of the Two Towers, and that is Gollum. And not only is Gollum so seamlessly added into real life scenes, but the animators really were able to create the CGI character with real emotional depth and complexity, and that's the hardest thing to do when you're an animator, to bridge the gap between computer animation and actual human emotion. And it's just amazing to see Gollum on screen. You forget that he's a CGI character. When Gollum like steps on a bush or whatever, like you see the leaves move, and he's just so seamlessly inside this world. But of course, the practical effects and the real stuff is just as impressive as the visual effects. Like the locations they use in this movie are amazing. The locations where Frodo, Sam, and Gollum journey through, like these mountains, the dead marshes and stuff. It's great how they're like an extreme far cry away from the homeliness of the Shire. You really kind of see how far they've gone. And I really like the design of Rohan because when Aragorn and the gang get to Edoras, it's amazing how Edoras is just this like little group of thatched houses, and it really kind of gives us an insight into the state of men in Lord of the Rings because they're pretty weak and they're somewhat poor, and yet they're still supposed to be like the hope for Middle Earth. They're supposed to be the future, and this is what they look like, and I love that. Of course, all the costumes are still great. The Rohan costumes are really, really nice and detailed. They managed to distinguish themselves from like Gondorian armor. The armor of the Easterlings is really cool too. What I love about the costumes in this entire trilogy is that they're so meticulously crafted, and they have like the culture of the realms like in the costumes. The armor that Eomer has has like horse decorations on it or whatever, and you can tell that Rohan really is like a nation of horse riders. Just little touches like that say so much about this world. Of course, you've still got great cinematography. You've got the grit. You've got like the sweeping shots. You've got really very well lit nighttime shots, and of course, the sound is just as scary and immersive as ever. We finally get to see the fell beasts that the Nazgul ride, and their screeches are really, really terrifying. The Battle of Helm's Deep sounds extremely epic and huge, large scale. And the Ents also, I think, also sound great because their voices are very kind of deep and haunting, and they sound just as a talking tree might sound. In terms of music, I think we get like one main new like theme addition to the score, and that's the Rohan theme. And objectively speaking, I think the Rohan theme might just be the best theme in the Lord of the Rings because of how layered it is and how complex of an emotion it brings out. Because when you hear like the Shire theme, you obviously think of like happy stuff and innocence or whatever. Then you hear the Rohan theme, you can't really put your finger on it. And the best way I can describe how it makes me feel is that it really kind of represents Rohan as this broken place that's really trying to salvage its honor. That's all. That's really all that Two Towers is all about. A lot of people don't really realize how important film editing is when making a movie, I think, and I think The Two Towers really has fantastic editing because you have to realize how difficult it is to be able to balance three different separate storylines while keeping like the transitions really smooth and just really keeping the main plot on track. And every single story arc here really feels like it's servicing one main plot. If you didn't like the old school editing of Fellowship of the Ring, it's not here anymore. There are no more like superimpositions of images on each other. There's much better use of slow-mo, I think. It really all just helps support the Two Towers' more mature tone. The Two Towers is arguably the slowest paced of the trilogy, but it still moves at a pace that keeps things very interesting. Again, the world building is absolutely fantastic. Every single moment spent in Middle Earth just feels extremely well spent. And it all really works as this really slow build to the climax, which is Helm's Deep, which is just absolutely insane and amazing to watch. What I love about the plot of the Two Towers is that it really just shows how much is at stake. Because in Fellowship, we only really know that these 9 members of the Fellowship are going off to fight against Sauron. But here we realize that it's gonna take a lot more than that, and the world of men really has to come into play here, and we really get to see how many parts have to come in play to stop Sauron. And knowing that the human race is like the future of Middle Earth, we finally get to see that we have to save like these people. These people have to be able to kind of claim their destiny. There's a lot more drama and political aspects even in this story instead of just like pure adventure. But I really think this depth really kind of gives the Two Towers its richness. I love also how the core characters are slowly being furthered and pushed to different lengths, while the new human characters are here really kind of represent the world of men very well. I think the characters of Theoden, of Grima Wormtongue, I think he's human, of Eomer, Eowyn, and Faramir. They all kind of illustrate that the world of men in this franchise is kind of trying to grasp onto something, trying to hold on to some semblance of honor. And then you've got the character of Gollum, who is extremely just on another level. He's just so psychologically complex, and you can tell that Gollum hates kind of who he is also because he has a split personality, Gollum and Smeagol, and you really want Smeagol to overcome Gollum's treachery. You want him to be like the kind of sweet and innocent creature he is. Two Towers is also funnier than the first movie also, and it's much more complex in its dialogue because it deals with more mature themes, but it still stays very intimate and personal and human. And I think the best example for this is Sam's speech at the end of the movie in Osgiliath, which never fails to make me want to cry. It is such good writing. In terms of the acting, it's still great across the board, especially with Elijah Wood. We're beginning to see Frodo's deterioration, and he has these flashes of anger and rage, and they're really shocking in how abrupt they are, and it's just kind of amazing to see how far Frodo has gone from the first movie to the second movie. With the new actors, I think Bernard Hill really captures Theoden's hopelessness and fatigue like extremely well. You can tell that he recognizes he's king, but like he has no idea really what he's holding on to. And like one of the main themes of the Two Towers really is hope, and you see like the antithesis of that with Theoden a bit. Brad Dourif as Grima Wormtongue is kind of your typical like slimy villain, but there's this depravity about him that makes him really interesting. Just the way he looks at Eowyn is so kind of sick, and it makes your skin crawl, but you kind of feel sorry for the guy. Karl Urban is always fun to watch, especially as Éomer. He's really like the big brother in this movie. Like he doesn't get that much screen time, but when he's on screen, you just want to cheer him on. It's like, yeah, Éomer. Now Miranda Otto's character Éowyn, while she doesn't really come into her own until Return of the King, here she really is able to show bits of Éowyn's emotional complexity. That she really kind of wants to prove herself to her father and show that she is, capable of fighting and taking care of herself. David Wenham plays Faramir kind of like Boromir, but somewhat quieter, somewhat more, not more desperate, but kind of like sadder. He really wants to just kind of prove his quality, and I think he really gets that across. He's a very sympathetic character. It's nice to have him interact with Frodo and the others. But of course, Andy Serkis absolutely steals the show as Gollum. Like just everything he does, his physicality, his voice, just the way he interacts also with the hobbits. And really, he's able to capture that psychological complexity of Gollum, and he really makes us care for both Gollum's sides. And it's just a performance of a lifetime. It's really put Andy Serkis on the map. Peter Jackson clearly has so much love and respect for this material. It's really evident in how every storyline in this movie is given an equal amount of care. Because while a lot of people really won't remember the Ent stuff as much as Helm's Deep or the stuff with Gollum. Peter Jackson still really puts really crafts each storyline really meticulously, and it's great that he doesn't kind of get lazy or just really focus too much on like the more important stuff. Like he really recognizes that each part is extremely important in this main plot. And he really understands how to create a set piece. I mean, just Helm's Deep, are you kidding? It has this extremely great use of the environment. Like, Helm's Deep itself is put to really great use. The action in that sequence is just constantly evolving. It's so endlessly fun to watch. People are doing crazy stunts everywhere. Legolas on the skateboard thing. And he doesn't forget to put character moments within the action, and these character moments actually drive the action also. So as crazy as the fighting gets, it's still very personal and intimate also. I think Peter Jackson respects the material enough to realize that the Two Towers had to be kind of a slow burn, but at the same time it's still a completely satisfying experience. You still feel like you've gone through like several full arcs by the time this movie ends. The Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers is an amazing movie. It's a great example of how a sequel really should not forget its roots, but at the same time add new elements that are not only important to the main story, but elements that will continue to stay in play until the third installment. And if Gollum doesn't impress you, if Helm's Deep doesn't impress you, I mean, the first scene of this movie should like hook you in. I mean, you get to see Gandalf killing a Balrog. I mean, come on. But what did you guys think of The Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers? Whatever you thought, whether you agreed or not, whether you loved it or you hated it, please leave me a comment. Let's have a conversation.